being in the right in any controversy. We know them, don't we? And a further reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives, not more laudable than these, are apt to operate as well upon those who support as upon those who oppose the right side of a question. Most lawyers should read that and understand that. Were there not even these inducements to moderation, nothing could be more ill-judged than that intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties. For in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. But Christians and patriots have a horrible, horrible knack of killing their wounded. And that goes completely contrary to what the Word of God teaches us. But we are the first ones to kill our wounded. And yet, however just these sentiments will be allowed to be, we have already sufficient indications that it will happen in this as in all former cases of great national discussion. A torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. Boy, do we see that today? Is that true today? To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we shall be led to conclude that they will mutually hope to evince the justness of their opinions and to increase the number of their converts by the loudness of their declamations. Do we see that today? We think there's some people that think if they talk louder over the top of somebody, somehow that makes them more right. It certainly doesn't. And thank you. An enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offspring of a temper found of despotic power and hostile to the principles of liberty. Notice he didn't say freedom. Principles of liberty. An overscrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as mere pretense and artifice. The bait for popularity at the expense of public good. It will be forgotten, on the one hand, that jealousy is the usual concomitant of violent love, and that the noble enthusiasm of liberty is too apt to be infected with a spirit of narrow and illiberal distrust. On the other hand, it will be equally forgotten that the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty. Remember Solon, without law there can be no freedom. Without law there can be no freedom. Why did God give us law? For that same reason. If there is no law, there cannot be liberty. On the other hand, it will be the equal forgotten the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty, that in the contemplation of a sound and well-informed judgment, their interests can never be separated, and that a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidding appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has been found a much more certain road to the introduction of despotism than the latter, and that those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number, have begun their career by paying an ubiquitous count to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. Isn't that the way it always starts? My congressman is an ex-pastor. His first term, he was golden. His next term, not so much. This last term, he voted to spend $70 million for gender studies in Pakistan. I'm like, who are you again? See, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you can't play in the sewer and come out and not have poop on you, right? This is why it's so important that the people govern themselves and that we refresh those bodies frequently. That's why. And he's talking about it right here. With the best of intentions. Remember, all people have good and evil in them. We all have the potential for good and evil, don't we? That all happened in the garden. So even good people can do evil things out of ignorance or out of zeal. Remember, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. In the course of the preceding observations, I've had an eye, my fellow citizens, to putting you upon your guard against all attempts from whatever quarter to influence your decision in a matter of the utmost moment to your welfare by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. You will no doubt at the same time have collected from the general scope of them that they proceed from a source not unfriendly to the new Constitution. Yes, my countrymen, I own to you that after having given it an attentive consideration, I am clearly of opinion it is your interest to adopt it. I am convinced that this is the safest course for your liberty, your dignity, and your happiness. I affect no reserves which I do not feel. I will not amuse you with an appearance of deliberation when I have decided. I frankly acknowledge to you my convictions, and I will freely lay before you the reasons on which they are founded. The consciousness of good intentions disdains ambiguity. I shall not, however, multiply professions on this head. My motives must remain in the depository of my own breast. My arguments will be open to all and may be judged of by them, or by all. They shall at least be offered in a spirit which will not disgrace the cause of truth. So he was very upfront that he's arguing for this Constitution, but that he's going to do his best to give all truth and leave as much of his feelings out of it as possible. I propose in a series of papers to discuss the following interesting particulars. The utility of the Union to your political prosperity. The insufficiency of the present confederation to preserve that Union. The necessity of a government at least equally energetic with the one proposed to the attainment of this object. The conformity of the proposed Constitution to the true principles of Republican government. Its analogy to your own state constitution. And lastly, the additional security which its adoption will afford to the preservation of that species of government, to liberty and to property. In the progress of this discussion, I shall endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to all the objections which shall have been made their appearance that may seem to have any claim to your attention. Now, there was a group, a couple different groups, that was writing the anti-Federalist papers. And there's many, many more of those because there was 2 or 3 different groups that were writing it. And as our founding fathers wrote the Federalist papers, they wrote under the pen name Publius. And the anti-Federalists most generally wrote under the pen name Brutus. So going back to the ancient republics of Rome and Greece, you can see the reason for the pen names. It may perhaps be thought superfluous to offer arguments to prove the utility of the Union, a point no doubt deeply engraved on the hearts of the great body of the people in every state, and one which it may be imagined has no adversaries. But the fact is that we already hear it whispered in the private circles of those who oppose the new Constitution, that the 13 states are of too great extent for any general system, and that we must of necessity resort to separate confederacies of distinct proportions of the whole. This doctrine will, in all probability, be gradually propagated till it has votaries enough to countenance an open avowal of it. For nothing can be more evident to those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than alternative of the adoption of the new Constitution or a dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that Union, the certain evils and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. Publius. Now, what he was talking about in the last slide, there was a gentleman that wrote a series of books called The Spirit of the Laws, and his name was Montesquieu, and he was a French philosopher, probably the quintessential expert on all republics, both ancient and modern. One of the things that Montesquieu said is republics only work on small areas of land. Now, the interesting thing throughout the Federalist Papers is Madison a lot of times quotes Montesquieu to prove his point. And a lot of the anti-federalists also quote Montesquieu to defend their point, using the same thing. And this is why one of the other, how many people have heard we're a democratic republic? I've heard that. How many people have heard that we're a constitutional republic? How many people have heard that we're a democracy?
Every day.
All of those are wrong. We are a compound republic, and here's why. How many people think that communism doesn't work? You're all wrong. Did you have families?
Sure.
Well, then you practiced a form of communism. Not Marxism, but communism. Marxism is something completely different. It goes along the lines of communism. But communism, basically, in its purest form, is exactly what Christ practiced with his disciples, where all work together for the betterment of everyone in that group. Now, communism only works on very, very small groups because you have to have a very deep emotional tie with everyone in that group for it to work. That's why it works for families. My kids always thought that they got to vote on things, and I told them, no, this is a communism, and I'm head czar, so no, it's my way, that's just how it is, because that's how I had to run the family. And what did they do? They cleaned their rooms, they cooked supper when their mom wasn't home, they cleaned up the living room, they helped me in the yard do chores, they helped me work on vehicles, that did a couple different things. That taught them how to be industrious, that taught them how to be self-sufficient, but it also taught them to give to the main group for the betterment of the group, right? I learned that growing up on the farm. I remember when I was 16, one day I said to my dad, you know what, some of my friends get paid an allowance to work on the farm. He said, they do? I said, yeah. He said, you remember that time you went hungry? And I said, no. He said, that's right. You've been paid already. See, we do this as a collective for each other. That's how we do this. That is a form of communism. Communism does work, but only in very, very small groups where everyone has a very deep emotional tie to each other. That's the only time it works. Once you get out bigger and there's not an emotional tie with those other people in that commune, it doesn't work. It fails. Now, a republic is the same way. A republic won't work on a landmass the size of Michigan or Indiana or Ohio. It won't work. A republic won't work. And Montesquieu said that. And the anti-federalists come back at Madison and said, you want us to have a republic? But our colonies are already too big of an area for a republic to work. That's when Madison said, but what we're going to do is we're going to break it up into compound republics. See, in Michigan, it's a republic, but it's not a true republic because it's broken up into 83 smaller republics known as counties. And my county's broken up into even smaller republics called townships. That's where Republican form of government works. And that's why it has to have representation. Now, anybody remember the 2020 election? How many people think that that 2020 election was
Rigged.
well, how many think that it was the safest, most secure election ever? Yeah, me either. Me either. So, but do you realize that Madison solved that problem in the Constitution? Do you think that they didn't worry about cheaters back then? Yeah, every card game, every horse race had one. Do you think that they weren't worried about foreign intervention into their elections? Yeah, they had to worry about Spain and France and England. They were worried about that. And this is where the compound republic comes in as a security, and the union comes in as a security, and the electoral college comes in as three inherent safeties to elections in the United States. And here's why. Because we've thought, and we've been taught through the 20th century, that our state is a republic, and that works as a republic. And we know from Montesquieu that it can't. It's too big. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution says that the state legislatures thereof will pick the electors of the Electoral College, right? Now, we have to look at what that means, thereof. That means the current setting legislature at the time of the conflict, or at the time of the contest, and every election is a contest, is it not? Okay. In Michigan, let me tell you how it worked in Michigan. Michigan, what we did is we've got 13 million voters. More if you count the dead that voted. But we've got 13 million voters. So what they did was they took all 13 million voters and they looked to see out of all 13 million who had the most votes out of those 13 million for a particular candidate. And at that time we had 16 electoral college votes, and they'd give all 16 electoral college votes to that person. Well, that's not a republic, is it? That's not a Republican form of government, because a Republican form of government has to have representation. I happen to live in the 7th Congressional District. The 7th Congressional District overwhelmingly voted for candidate A. But our electoral college vote got sent to candidate B because of all 13 million voters. Do you see where this is going now? See, if we would have done it by the congressional districts, like it should have been, like Madison intended it to be, then if there's any cheating, it can only be done in a couple places. And out of those 16, maybe 3 or 4 would have been cheated, but not all 16. Do you see the genius in the electoral college vote? Do you see the genius in the multiple republics, the compound republics? Michigan is a compound republic of 83 republics. And out of those 83 republics, certain ones are put together to make a congressional district. Each congressional district gets 1 electoral college vote. And prior to the 17th Amendment, when the state legislature picked the senators, each one of them had a vote, and it could be 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, it could be 2 Republicans, or it could be 2 Democrats. Since the 17th Amendment, we've had nothing but Democrats. Why? Because we have Grand Rapids and Wayne County and Detroit. So do you see the inherent genius in what Madison did? But do you see how bad we bastardized it for today's politics. So we go on the whole statewide thing. Now let me tell you what the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is. That means we're looking for 274 electoral college votes among a certain group of states that sign contracts with one another. Now what those contracts say, that's the Interstate Compact, right? Compact is a contract. National Popular Vote, let's say Indiana joins the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And let's say everybody in the state votes for candidate A. And only one person votes for candidate B in your state. But these other states that you have a contract with, when they add up the majority of all those votes, it's for candidate B. So your state's contracted that you'll give all your electoral college votes to candidate B because among all the states in the compact, that's who had the most votes. Do you see the inherent problem with this? This is democracy. See, we've been practicing a form of democracy in our elections when we don't follow the Constitution, when we're looking at the entire state as a whole republic, and it is not. It's too big of a tract of land for a Republican form of government to work. Just like communism works on a very, very small scale with certain qualifications, which means everybody in that group has to be emotionally tied to one another. A republic only works when it's no bigger than the size of a county or a congressional district. Does this make sense now? I get so many people that go, oh, you don't understand, John. No, the problem is I understand it too well. My own senator, Mike Shirkey, Republican, co-sponsored a National Popular Vote Interstate Compact bill in Michigan. He obviously has never read Federalist 10. He obviously doesn't understand how the Electoral College works. Many people don't. I talk to professors. They don't have a clue. Oh, it's because they didn't want to trust anybody. They figured farmers were stupid. No, they didn't. That's not what it was about. It was about keeping foreign intervention out of our elections and controlling people who like to cheat. That's what our Electoral College was all about. And we're not following it proper. Now, we claim we've got Electoral College, and everybody goes around, they use that term, but most people don't understand how it works. And if you don't demand of your representatives that you get represented in your congressional district exactly the way that Madison set it up, then cheating's going to happen, and you don't get represented. Was I represented in 2020 in Congressional District 7? Absolutely not. Not when I was voting for that one Electoral College vote for candidate A, and candidate A in the 7th district overwhelmingly won, but they gave my Electoral College vote to candidate B. Was I represented? No. And if we have the Constitution, we have a Republican form of government. Article 4, Section 1, Clause 4 guarantees me a Republican form of government in every state, doesn't it? Guarantees every person in every state a Republican form of government. A Republican form of government must have representation for it to be Republican. So, if your congressional district isn't being represented, then did you have a Republican form of government? That's something to ponder, isn't it? That's something to ponder. This is why the Federalist Papers are important. Because it will make you understand simple little concepts that have been absolutely mistaught in the John Dewey public school system in the last 120 years. You need to make sure that the people that you're electing understand those things as well. Because if they don't understand them, they're not the representative for you. So, are there any questions, concerns, comments? I hope this class had some, I hope I didn't break it up too much. Hope this class had some value in it. But these are some concepts that I want you to think about. As we read these Federalist Papers, read them in the context of today. Because the human condition hasn't changed since the garden. And I got news for you. It's not going to change until Revelation, the last page, is done. It will not change. Mankind is not going to change. The human condition is the same. So, next week is going to be Federalist 10, I believe.
Yes.
Federalist 10. Federalist 10 is a good one. Like I said, it's one of the ones that's quoted a lot. It talks about Republican form of government and democracies. It talks about faction being the enemy of all popular government. And it defines what faction is. And it tells us how to deal with faction. And it tells us how to keep our representatives in good behavior. So it's one of the most quoted ones for a reason. So, if there aren't any more comments, questions, or concerns, thank you for coming tonight, and I'll see you next week. Go ahead.
Do you think we can possibly get back to paper ballots? Sorry. That was a heavy sigh.
My thing is this. I get told I'm wrong on this all the time. And I may be. Even cheating with electronic ballots and ballot counters, if we were to follow Madison's guide, they can't cheat on all of them. The rural areas will probably be the most pure vote there is. It's the inner cities that are going to be bad. But then again, in Michigan, now instead of having 16 electoral college votes, we only have 15. Because people are trying to exit us out of that mistake too. So, if we start demanding that we get represented, even with electronic ballots, they can't cheat them all. They can only cheat some. And if
How
we get,
large does that sum have to be before it has any consequence?
but that's the beautiful thing, the way Madison's got it set up, there's over 30,000 counties in the United States. 30,000. So if you do statistics and understand statistics, even if they took all the major city centers, the rural counties will still be represented. And the rural counties that have the smaller counts are going to represent the country much better. See, right now, if you look at the map, especially the 2020 map, it was red everywhere except for some real dark blue places, some light blue places, and a couple purple places, right? But they were small, East Coast, West Coast, major cities, right? So that means if we go to national popular vote, or if we go to a democratic vote, what happens is only those people in those major city centers control the representation for everyone, even the rural people. If that's the case, the rural people never get represented, ever. However, if we did it the way Madison intended, it would counteract that. And that's the whole reason why he did that. I mean, it was pure genius if you look at that. If you do, someday if we ever get 100 people, I'd love to show you an experiment, how we do that. And we get certain groups, and we do it by the Electoral College vote, and you'll see, we'll pick 20% of those groups to cheat, and they can't overturn the election. They can't do it because the Electoral College vote works so well. So, can we get back to paper ballots? As I pray to God, I hope we can. But I don't know that we will because there's too many lazy people in the world, especially these clerks that we're hiring that want to do the quick count. When I was growing up, we always had to wait for Detroit ballots to come in. Everybody would be counted by 10 o'clock. We were always waiting until midnight, 1 o'clock to listen to see what the vote in Michigan was because we had to see the ballots in Detroit. Well, for a long time, I was stupid enough to think, well, yeah, because there's a lot of people there, a lot of counting. Do you realize every voting precinct has about the same amount of people? So if we could count them in our precincts in Hillsdale,
Yeah.
why couldn't they count them there? Public school, maybe, I don't know. But a lot of times it was held back to see how many we needed. Well, if we did it by Madison's,